Hi, I'm Kelly at Book and Paper Arts. Some time back, I made a video showing how to make crispy paper out of paper napkins. Well, today I have an adaptation on that technique showing how to make faux paper parchment and a kind of paper lace with a smoky look to it. And these are going to be made using a paper napkin, but instead of the printed side, I'm going to use the white backing side, like this. And if you don't have napkins on hand, stick with me anyway, please, because you can do the same techniques that I'm going to demonstrate using a paper towel. This piece of lovely, crispy faux parchment was made with a kitchen towel, paper towel like this. Don't tell me you ain't got none. This project it's messy, but it's easy, it is very budget friendly, and the best part is you can take these techniques in so many directions and make them look like you and what you want to make. So please join me as we learn how to do this. If you like journal arts, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and be sure to turn on the notifications. And you will have more of them in your life. You'll also help this channel grow. Let's go make some paper parchment. The materials that you're going to need today, pretty much paper napkin and paste. For the paper napkin, we're not going to be using this print side. There are, I do have, as I said, a video showing how to turn the print side of a paper napkin into beautiful, crispy, crunchy paper. And I'm going to link to that in the text box below this video so you can find it. Today, however, this is what we want. There are usually 1, 2, 3, or even 4 layers in most paper napkins to make them absorbent. Separating these can be a bit fiddly. So what I'm going to do, and I want to thank everybody who wrote in and told me how to do this, is to put a piece of washi tape or masking tape on either side of the layers. Here's one on the plain side and one on the printed side. And now very, very, very gently, that's going to separate them for me. This napkin was huge, and I cut it in half. It's much easier to work with if you cut them down to the size that you're going to be using. I know I'm making book pages out of these, so I do not need a napkin the size of a quilt. Now there's another white layer here. Let's add the washi tape. Gently pull, and hey, presto. And now we're going to work with this. You can also do a version of this with a kitchen towel. That is a plain old paper towel. I'm just going to put the washi tape on one side, one on the other side, and now I can gently separate these delicate layers. And turn them into faux paper parchment. You're also going to need paste. This is not glue. This is not a PVA. It is not a matte medium. This is paste that is made from cornstarch or corn flour and water. And that's all it is. I have a recipe and a lesson here, a video lesson on how to make this. It is so, so easy. It's just corn flour and water and stirring, and in 5 minutes you've got homemade paste. The reason that you want to use a homemade starch-based paste instead of the PVA or the matte medium is that PVA and matte medium have plastic in them. And that will make your papers pretty, but not crinkly, not like a parchment, which is what we want today. This is plain, and then this is one that I've added a really good solid spoonful of instant coffee into. You could also substitute brewed coffee for some of your water, and you can use less or more depending on the tint that you want. But this is just handmade starch paste with instant coffee. And that's going to give us the parchment pigment. The trickiest. You cannot add paste directly to this thin, tissuey paper. Do not do it. It will end in tears. Instead, I've got a piece of parchment paper here. You can also use wax paper or deli paper or something to protect your surface in the paper. Now I have a big old glob of this coffee-colored paste. And I'm going to paint it onto my parchment paper. Do not worry if there are some lumps. They dry out. Now I'm going to put down this thin single sheet of paper napkin and press it into that layer of glue paste. And that is my first layer. Now, I know this is lumpy. Of course, you could thin it out, but I wouldn't. You need that paste in there, that starch in there to give your napkin body after it dries. So the only thing for it is to be gentle. So now that this is in place, I am gently painting some more of this coffee-colored paste onto my napkin. Make sure you got plenty on there and work it in. You want to be gentle, but add as much pressure as you need. Don't worry if the first 2 or 3 give you some grief. That is normal, and you will get better at it. Also, do not worry if you get holes, if it pulls up and makes a hole in there. 1, it's going to, so you might as well accept it. 2, you can kind of paste it back into shape at this point in the process because your piece is all mushy. 2, it's the nature of this kind of paper that we're making, that it might have a rip or a hole or a snag. And again, accept it and call it texture. Own it. Just take your time and coat your paper. Before I put this away to dry, I want to show you that there are some lumps there. Try to brush them out, but if you can't without damaging the paper, just leave them. They will kind of absorb into the paper, and or they will just be part of the look. Here is a variety of making the parchment paper with and adding some mark making. I've got a pipette and I'm using ink made from onion skins, but you can also use any kind of ink, fountain pen ink. You can use watercolor, watered down acrylics. Use what you got. And I'm just adding some splatters. Splatters. I love you. You don't want to overdo it because the water-based color here in the ink will make your wet paper even more fragile even after it starts drying. So just add a little bit, some smidgens of color, not big old blobs. You know, I'm going to work that around a little bit. It's not moving much, but it's going to continue to feather a little bit and bleed out and make different patterns. Wet on wet. So I am just going to leave that and let the ink go where it wants to go and dry. Here's another variety of that mark making. This time I've used the paper napkin, and instead of using the coffee colored paste, I've used the neutral color, the way it just comes. And it almost goes invisible. When it's dry, it looks so almost glassy. I love it. In this case, if you add the ink or a strong color, it's going to be even more dramatic. Just going to put a couple of those dabs there. And what I'm going to do this time is very carefully activate it with a little bit of water. Again, you want to have a very light hand with that water because it will dilute the paste. Now, another way is I'm going to add some coffee grounds. And this can sometimes make a lot of drama. Now, the paste is not as wet enough to activate these. It will actually, if you leave it, it will start to feather out, but it will still kind of be blobby. So again, I'm going to activate these with a little water. Very little. You don't need much. I'm just going to leave that and see what happens when it dries. If you have been trying this and you've still making some little rips and tears and it's driving you nuts, this next technique is for you, because we are going to be deliberately putting holes and tears in this distressed paper to make this lace. Now, I call it paper lace, but you know what? I think it actually looks a lot like paper that has been burned with a candle. And some of you have probably tried that technique where you singe the edges of your paper with a candle flame or a lighter. And I love how that looks. But for me, it's very difficult to control. And if you're not careful, there goes your project. And if you're like me, there goes your eyebrows. So I'm going to try this instead and get that effect. This is the white part of the napkin, and I've used the neutral colored paste, and I've got it down there. And what I'm going to do to make the flamey looks, to get that burned, singed look, is I'm using walnut ink that I made. And if you don't have walnut ink, you can use brown watercolor paints or watered down acrylics, any kind of brown pigment that you have. This is very forgiving and inexact. So I'm just putting that down as we did with the mark making. And you can see it is bleeding a little bit. And now I want to make holes where this is. Now, you don't have to use this making the holes with the ink. You could just make them in your plain cloth, and you're going to get more of a lace effect. Play around with it, maybe use some other colors, pigments. This is just to try to get that singed look. And you can use different things to make your holes. This is the handle of a brush, or you can use the brush. I got some good effects with that because it let me brush the paper a little. You can use a brochette. Just anything to make a tear there and move it around. I'm going to let that dry. Now everything is dry, but before we look at the finished results, I want to show you the best way to get your new crispy papers off of the greaseproof paper that you've used underneath. I get the best results using a card. And I'm just sliding it under the edge carefully. You see that wants to stick, so I'm just kind of working the card in there. This is especially true when you've done some mark making with another liquid, because that liquid has made the paper and the paste more fragile. So just take your time and work your card or knife or whatever it is you're using under there gently. And if you hit a snag, just work in there and get it loose gently. And it will come off like that. The lace paper especially is fiddly because where that paint or ink is, the liquid pigment, it's glued itself to the paper even more. So again, just go very carefully under those painted areas. And it will lift off. Just take your time and work with it. Those were all the techniques. Now let's look at the results. This one is just plain old faux parchment. It's got different grades of color, texture. It looks very organic. And this is the version that I made on the kitchen towel. Just the plain old paper towel. And you can see it also sounds and feels like parchment. Here's one where I used the neutral colored paste, and this is the mark making with some walnut ink. It's very dramatic. And these are the other two other ways of mark making. This was with the onion skin ink that I activated with a little water so it spread out. And these are with the coffee granules, the instant coffee granules that I put on the wet paste and then also activated lightly with some water. I like that a lot. It almost looks like paper foxing. Here is that technique, and instead of, this was on the neutral colored paper, this is how it turned out on the coffee colored paper. So, again, a lot of drama there. And finally, let's have a look at how that paper lace turned out. This is one where I made really big holes. And I was kind of afraid of it, but now that I see it, I like it better. Here is the version with more controlled holes, and I like that too. They're similar but different. This is using the walnut ink color on the coffee color paper as opposed to the neutral paper. And again, this is really looking as though it's been singed over a flame. And then this is the one I made using that brick colored onion skin ink. What are some ways that we can use these papers? You will not be surprised to hear that I am going to be starting off by using them, binding them into a messy journal, one of my distressed boiled books. So I can add that as some pages, and it's going to add some texture and interest to the signature. You can also, let's see, if I made junk journals, I would probably try sewing these together here and here and making little pockets. And then gluing those in, or a pocket this way. You can also tear them up for fodder. And then add this to your stash to add in your abstract collage, or embellishing pages, filling up spaces, for adding to paper scrolls. Just anything that you want to do where you need some super original, gorgeous, messy, wild paper. If you like this video and this channel and its content, please consider helping to support it. And you can do that by following a link in the text box that will take you to Ko-fi, where you can make a one-off donation or become a monthly member. Also, check out that box beneath this video, because that's where you're going to find links to the recipe for the paste, the handmade paste, and the original napkin video that is actually longer and more detailed. If you have any ideas or any questions, any suggestions, any thoughts about how you would use papers like this, please let me know in the comments. We can compare notes and I'll be the richer for it and the more creative. Until later, happy making.